A quiet walk in the park. Frank Thompson had always believed in the power of memories. At 91, he carried the weight of history not just in his heart, but also in the fading photographs and medals that adorned the walls of his small apartment in downtown Millbrook. Each picture told a story, each medal a testament to bravery, sacrifice, and a life lived on the front lines. From the hallowed beaches of Normandy to the solemnity of liberating concentration camps, he had witnessed humanity at its best and worst. Yet, in his twilight years, nothing prepared him for the weight of loneliness that settled heavily in his chest. His small apartment felt like a museum of the past, a space filled with echoes of laughter and camaraderie that had long since faded. Faded photographs of comrades long gone stared back at him, their smiles frozen in time. In the center of it all, an American flag hung proudly above his television, a symbol of the life he had dedicated to serving his country. Frank had seen the world rebuild itself after the horrors of war, yet he found himself struggling to adapt to the quiet that enveloped his life now. Despite his age, Frank was fiercely independent. He drove his old Buick to the grocery store every week, attended Veterans Day parades with a sense of pride, and never missed his monthly meetups with fellow veterans at the local diner. It was during one of these routine meetups 5 years ago that his life took an unexpected turn. He had been sharing war stories with his usual group when the roar of motorcycles filled the air. It was the Steel Angels, a local biker club that had entered his life like a thunderstorm, shaking up his mundane existence. Initially, Frank eyed them warily. Their leather jackets, tattooed arms, and raucous laughter felt worlds away from his neatly pressed slacks and silver hair. But what began as a cautious observation blossomed into an unlikely friendship. The bikers approached their table with respect, treating them not as relics of the past, but as brothers in arms. They bought a round of coffee, a simple gesture that made Frank feel seen and valued in a way he hadn't in years. As time went on, the Steel Angels adopted Frank as their honorary mascot. They checked in on him regularly, helped with household repairs, and always made sure he had a ride to important appointments. Frank's neighbors had mixed reactions to this new alliance. Some viewed it with amusement. Mrs. Abery from across the hall had to stifle her shock when she first saw Frank perched on the back of Bear's Harley, a grin stretching across his weathered face. Others were less enthusiastic. A group of young men, regulars at the park across from Frank's apartment, took to mocking the old veteran. They mimicked his slow shuffle, made exaggerated salutes as he walked by, and loudly questioned why he hadn't kicked the bucket yet. Each jeer landed like a punch, stunning Frank more than he cared to admit. In the solitude of his apartment, he sometimes questioned whether their cruel words had a ring of truth. Had he outlived his usefulness in a world that seemed to have less room for old soldiers like him? On this particular sunny afternoon, Frank decided to take a walk in the park, hoping the fresh air would lift his spirits. He donned his favorite cap, embroidered with the insignia of his unit from World War II. As he strolled along the path, the sun warmed his face, and he welcomed the gentle breeze that rustled through the trees. Children laughed as they played, couples strolled hand in hand, and life pulsed all around him. Yet he felt like an outsider looking in. As he made his way past the park benches, Frank spotted the group of young men who had become his unwelcome shadows. They were gathered in a circle, laughing loudly, and tossing a football back and forth. He held his head high, determined to ignore them as he always did. But as he passed, the laughter faded, and he could feel their eyes on him. "Look, it's Grandpa," one of them yelled, causing the others to burst into laughter. "What's the matter? Lost your way to the nursing home?" Frank's heart sank. He quickened his pace, trying to block out their taunts, but their words echoed in his mind, stirring up insecurities he thought he had buried long ago. Was he really just an old man, a relic of a bygone era? As he hit send, the young men laughed even louder, their mockery cutting deeper. "What's the matter, old man? Calling for your biker gang to save you?" One of them sneered. But this time, Frank felt something shift within him. Yes, he was an old soldier, but he was not alone. He had fought battles before, and he would fight this one too. With newfound resolve, he straightened his back and met the eyes of the young man before him. "You know what?" Frank said, his voice steady. "I've seen more in my lifetime than you could ever imagine. And trust me, I'm not done yet." With that, he stepped around the young man and continued his walk, head held high. He knew that the Steel Angels were just a call away, and together they would show these young punks that respect didn't come with age. It was earned through courage, camaraderie, and standing your ground. As Frank walked on, he could feel a change in the air. The sun continued to shine, illuminating his path, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. The laughter of the young men faded behind him, replaced by the thought of the roaring motorcycles, the camaraderie of the Steel Angels, and the promise of friendship that had lifted him out of loneliness. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Frank donned his leather jacket, the one that had been tucked away in the back of his closet for too long. He could hardly contain his excitement as he heard the rumble of bikes approaching. Within moments, Bear and the other members of the Steel Angels pulled up outside his apartment, their faces beaming with enthusiasm. "Ready to ride, Frank?" Bear called out, his voice booming with energy. "Always," Frank replied, a smile spreading across his face. He joined them, leaving behind the whispers and taunts, and stepped into the world of his brothers in arms. Little did he know, this ride would set off a chain of events that would not only transform his life, but also teach those young men a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. The roar of friendship. The wind whipped through Frank's hair as he settled onto the back of Bear's motorcycle, the familiar vibrations sending a thrill through his body. It had been far too long since he'd felt this alive, the chaos of life falling away behind him. The roar of the engines echoed in the cool evening air, creating a symphony that filled him with energy. As they pulled away from the curve, he felt as if the world was opening up before him once again, each mile taking him further away from loneliness and despair. The Steel Angels rode with a camaraderie that reminded Frank of the brotherhood he had known in the war. They formed a protective circle around him, each biker looking out for the other, ensuring that no one was left behind. As they cruised through the streets of Millbrook, Frank felt a sense of belonging that had eluded him for far too long. The laughter, the shared stories, and the simple act of being together brought a warmth that was almost palpable. They headed toward the outskirts of town, where the open road stretched out like a promise. As they reached a scenic overlook, Bear slowed the bike and pulled to a stop. The view was breathtaking. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the landscape. The other bikers dismounted, and Frank followed suit, taking a moment to breathe in the crisp air. "Check this out, Frank," one of the younger bikers exclaimed, snapping a picture with his phone. "You've got to capture this moment." Frank chuckled, feeling more like a young man than the veteran he was. They settled on the edge of the overlook, sharing stories and laughter as the sun dipped lower. Frank found himself recounting tales of his youth, of battles fought and friendships forged in the heat of conflict. The Steel Angels listened intently, their respect for him growing with every word he shared. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, Bear stood up and clapped his hands together, commanding attention. "All right, listen up. We've got a mission tonight, boys. We're not just out here for the views. We're going to pay a visit to our favorite diner and show Frank a good time." The group erupted in cheers, and Frank couldn't help but grin. The thought of sharing a meal and camaraderie with his new family filled him with joy. They hopped back onto their bikes and rode off into the night, the roar of their engines reverberating through the streets. Frank felt a familiar pang of discomfort wash over him. The jeers reminded him of the young men in the park, mocking him and undermining his existence. But this time, he wasn't alone. The Steel Angels were by his side, and he could sense their anger simmering beneath the surface. Bear caught Frank's eye, a silent understanding passing between them. "Don't pay them any mind, Frank," he said, his voice low but steady. "You're one of us, and we don't let anyone disrespect our family." As their food arrived, the Steel Angels shifted the focus back to Frank, regaling him with stories of their own experiences and battles. They spoke of the challenges they faced, not only on the road but in their personal lives. Frank listened intently, drawing strength from their resilience and tenacity. But the whispers from the nearby table persisted, growing louder as the night continued. "What do you think he's done, huh?" "Probably nothing. Just some old man with a few medals," one of them scoffed. Frank clenched his fists, the urge to retaliate rising within him. But Bear placed a hand on his shoulder, a calming presence that grounded him. "Let it go, Frank. You've got bigger battles to fight. We're here for you, not them." In that moment, Frank realized that his true worth wasn't determined by the opinions of those young men. He had faced real battles, fought for freedom, and stood for what was right. With each passing year, he had gained wisdom and strength that couldn't be undermined by their ignorance. As the night wore on, and the laughter filled the diner once more, Frank felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just an old soldier, he was a warrior in his own right, surrounded by a new family that lifted him up rather than tearing him down. After finishing their meals, Bear raised his glass in a toast. "To family, to friendship, and to Frank, our honorary brother. May we ride together for many more miles to come." The Steel Angels raised their glasses, their voices mingling in a chorus of agreement. Frank felt a rush of emotion, gratitude washing over him. In that moment, he understood that he had found his place once more, a place where respect was earned, where loyalty was unwavering, and where he could be himself without fear of ridicule. As they left the diner, the night air wrapped around them like a comforting blanket. They hopped on their bikes, the engines roaring to life once again. Frank closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling the scent of the open road, the thrill of freedom coursing through his veins. Tonight was just the beginning. He felt empowered, ready to confront the young men in the park and show them that age was not a measure of worth. With the Steel Angels by his side, he was more than just a veteran. He was a force to be reckoned with. As they rode through the streets of Millbrook, Frank felt the weight of loneliness lift, replaced by the joy of belonging. The laughter and camaraderie filled his heart, reminding him that life was not just about surviving but truly living. The roar of friendship echoed in the night, and with each mile they traveled, Frank knew that he had found his voice once again. Confronting shadows, the following morning dawned bright and clear, the sun casting golden rays across Frank's modest apartment. As he sat at his small kitchen table, sipping coffee and gazing out the window, memories of last night's camaraderie with the Steel Angels flooded his mind. For the first time in years, he felt invigorated, a sense of purpose propelling him forward. He had friends who cared for him, a family of misfits who shared his spirit and understood his journey. Yet, as he prepared for his day, a flicker of anxiety crept in, particularly about facing the young men in the park. Would they be waiting for him again, ready to unleash their taunts and mockery? The laughter from the diner echoed in his mind, but so did the harsh jeers. Frank shook off the unease, reminding himself of the strength he had found in his new friends. After donning his leather jacket, a gift from Bear that made him feel like a warrior, Frank stepped outside, feeling the cool breeze against his skin. He took a deep breath, grounding himself. Today would be different. Today, he would no longer be a target. Today, he would reclaim his space. As he approached the park, he noticed the vibrant colors of autumn, leaves cascading to the ground. Families played, children laughed, and joggers strolled by, all oblivious to the storm brewing in Frank's mind. He made his way down the familiar path, heart pounding in anticipation. He could see the group of young men gathered in the distance, their laughter echoing through the park. They were as boisterous as ever, tossing a football and leaning against the railings of the playground, eyes alight with mischief. Frank felt a swell of anger rise within him, mixed with an uncomfortable sensation of vulnerability. It was as if he was back in the trenches, preparing for battle against an unseen enemy. But this time, he was not alone. He was armed with the support of the Steel Angels. Before he could lose his nerve, he pulled out his phone and sent a quick message to Bear. "I'm at the park. I think I need you guys." Almost immediately, his phone buzzed with a response. "On our way. Hold tight, brother." With renewed determination, Frank walked toward the young men, each step firmer than the last. They hadn't noticed him yet, their focus entirely on their game. But as he drew nearer, their laughter trailed off, replaced by smirks and whispers. He steeled himself, focusing on the challenge ahead. "Hey, old man, come to join the fun," one of them called out, a cocky grin plastered across his face. Frank stopped, feeling the heat of their gazes like a spotlight. "I'm not here to play, and I'm not your punching bag," he replied, his voice steady despite the tremor of fear in his chest. "What's wrong? Did we hurt your feelings?" Another one sneered, their laughter echoing in the cool air. At that moment, Frank felt a rush of adrenaline. He remembered the strength of his fellow soldiers, the resolve they had shown in the face of overwhelming odds. "You think you're funny?" he called back, his voice growing stronger. "You think making fun of an old man is a way to prove yourself? I've fought for this country, fought for the freedom you enjoy every day." The young men exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Frank pressed on, emboldened by the knowledge that he wasn't alone. "You have no idea what I've seen or the sacrifices I've made. Mocking me doesn't make you tough. It just shows how weak you really are." Just then, the rumble of motorcycles filled the air, and Frank's heart soared as he spotted Bear and the Steel Angels approaching. They rolled in like a thunderstorm, a wave of leather and steel, bringing an unmistakable energy with them. The young men's confidence faltered as the bikers parked their bikes and dismounted, their presence commanding the park. "What's going on here?" Bear's deep voice cut through the air, his towering figure casting a long shadow over the group. Frank turned to his friends, relief washing over him. "I'm just reminding them that respect is earned, not given," he said, meeting Bear's gaze with gratitude. The young men exchanged nervous glances, their bravado slowly crumbling. Bear stepped forward, his eyes locked onto the young men. "You think it's funny to mock someone who has given everything for this country? You think you're tough? Try living through a war and coming back to face your own demons. Yeah, what do you know about life?" One of the young men spat, though his voice lacked conviction. Bear took a step closer, his imposing figure towering over the group. "More than you can imagine, kid. Life isn't about showing off or making fun of those who've been through hell. It's about standing up for each other and recognizing the sacrifices made for the freedoms you take for granted." The tension in the air thickened as the Steel Angels closed ranks around Frank, forming a protective barrier. Frank felt a swell of pride and gratitude for these men who had embraced him as one of their own. They were more than just bikers. They were a brotherhood, and they stood united in their respect for one another. "Look, we don't want any trouble," one of the young men finally muttered, glancing around at his friends. "We were just having some fun." Frank took a step forward, meeting their gazes directly. "You call it fun. I call it cowardice. If you want to impress someone, why don't you try showing kindness instead? Treat others with respect, and you'll earn it in return." The young men shifted uncomfortably, their bravado fading. One of them, a tall kid with dark hair, glanced at Frank and then at Bear. I didn't mean anything by it. We just thought." "You thought wrong," Bear interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "If you want to act tough, you need to learn what real strength is. It's not about tearing others down. It's about lifting each other up. You've got a long way to go, but you can start by apologizing." Frank could see the gears turning in the young men's heads. The bravado was slipping away, replaced by uncertainty. After a moment of silence, the dark-haired kid spoke up again. "I'm sorry, man. We were just messing around. I didn't think." The other young men nodded, murmuring their own apologies. Frank felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction wash over him. "Thank you. It takes guts to admit you were wrong," he said, his voice steady. "We've all made mistakes, but it's how we learn from them that matters." Bear nodded, and the Steel Angels stood tall beside Frank, their solidarity undeniable. "We're not saying you have to become friends with him," Bear continued, gesturing to Frank. "But you could certainly learn something from his experiences. Treat him like a fellow human being, and maybe you'll find respect for him. And yourselves." With that, the young men slowly backed away, the air of hostility evaporating. Frank felt a weight lift off his shoulders as they retreated, their heads down in defeat. He turned to Bear and the Steel Angels, gratitude flooding his heart. "Thank you, guys. I couldn't have done that without you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Bear placed a hand on Frank's shoulder, a reassuring gesture. "You stood your ground, Frank. You're not just an old man. You're a warrior. Remember that." As the park began to fill with the sounds of laughter and joy once more, Frank realized he had transformed a painful encounter into an opportunity for growth, for himself and the young men. He had faced the shadows of mockery and emerged stronger, standing not just for himself, but for those who had fought beside him. The Steel Angels gathered around him, a sense of camaraderie enveloping them. "Let's celebrate," one of the younger bikers shouted, his eyes alight with excitement. "How about a ride to the diner?" Frank's heart soared at the thought. "I'd love that. Let's go." They mounted their bikes, the roar of engines igniting a sense of freedom that filled the air. As they rode through the streets of Millbrook, Frank felt an unshakable bond with his friends. The park had become a battleground, but now it was also a reminder of his resilience, a testament to the power of friendship and the strength of unity. As they approached the diner, the neon lights flickered cheerfully, inviting them in. The staff greeted them warmly, and the familiar atmosphere wrapped around Frank like a comforting blanket. They settled into their usual booth, laughter filling the air as they shared stories of the encounter in the park. "You know, Frank," Bear said, raising his glass, "I've always respected your courage, but today you showed what it truly means to stand up for what's right." "Here's to Frank, the old warrior," another biker chimed in, and they all raised their glasses in unison. As the laughter rang through the diner, Frank felt the weight of the past lift. He had faced mockery and doubt, but he had also discovered the strength of friendship. Surrounded by the Steel Angels, he knew he would never have to face the darkness alone again. Together, they would ride through the challenges ahead. And together, they would shine a light on the path of respect and camaraderie. The road ahead. The following days unfolded like a series of vivid postcards. The harshness of the past was beginning to blur, softened by the camaraderie Frank found among the Steel Angels. The diner had become a second home, a sanctuary where laughter echoed off the walls, and the scent of fresh coffee intertwined with stories of old and new. Each meeting with the bikers strengthened their bond, and Frank felt a rejuvenation he hadn't experienced in years. He had transitioned from being a target of ridicule to a valued member of a family that respected him. Yet, with this newfound joy came an unexpected challenge, the desire to help those young men he had confronted in the park. One evening, after a long day filled with repairs at the diner, Frank found himself staring at the weathered photographs that adorned his walls. The faces of his fallen comrades seemed to watch over him, urging him to act. He thought about the young men, about their potential for change. They weren't just punks. They were kids, perhaps lost in their own lives, searching for meaning or acceptance in the wrong ways. "Maybe I could reach out to them," he mused aloud, the words echoing in his quiet apartment. "They need a mentor, someone to show them the right path." His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Bear, always attuned to Frank's thoughts. "You okay, brother? You seem deep in thought." "I'm thinking about those kids from the park," Frank replied. "I want to talk to them, help them see things differently." "That's a big step," Bear responded. "You sure you want to open that door?" Frank paused, weighing his options. He thought about the impact that his own mentors had made on him during his youth. If I don't try, who will? They're just kids. They deserve a chance. Bear was silent for a moment before replying. All right, let's set it up. I'll back you up, whatever you need. A sense of purpose surged within Frank as he contemplated his plan. The next day, he donned his favorite cap, the one that had seen so many seasons, and headed to the park with a stack of pamphlets about local youth programs and opportunities. He thought they might be helpful, perhaps showing the kids that there were other ways to find camaraderie and respect beyond their current lifestyle. As he approached the park, he felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety swirl within him. The familiar sight of the young men came into view, clustered together once more. This time, however, they seemed less boisterous, their energy dulled by the lingering summer heat. Hey, Frank called out, his voice steady but friendly. Can we talk? The group turned, their expressions shifting from surprise to wariness. The dark-haired kid, the one who had apologized, stepped forward. What do you want, old man? Frank took a breath, grounding himself. I know you guys don't know me very well, but I want to help you. What I said the other day was true. You can find better ways to earn respect than by mocking someone. The kids exchanged glances, uncertainty written across their faces. What do you know about us? One of them challenged, arms crossed defiantly. I know enough to see that you're looking for something. Frank replied, holding their gazes steadily. When I was your age, I was lost too. I didn't know where I fit in, but I found my place in the military, serving with men who became brothers to me. That's where I learned about respect and honor. The dark-haired kid shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. Encouraged by the lack of outright hostility, Frank pressed on. You can find your own community, something meaningful. There are local programs that can help you channel your energy into something positive. Sports, volunteering, even riding lessons. What do you know about riding? A taller boy scoffed, still not entirely convinced. Frank's face broke into a smile. I know a thing or two about motorcycles. In fact, I've got a few friends who are part of a biker club. They'd love to help you out. You can learn about bikes, and you'd be surprised at how tight-knit our community is. Why would we want to hang out with you and your old friends? Another one piped up, skepticism still lingering in his tone. Because you don't have to do this alone, Frank said, his voice steady. You're not just kids anymore. You're on the brink of becoming men. You have the power to shape your futures, to decide how you want to be seen in this world. The group fell silent, the weight of Frank's words hanging in the air. He could see their defenses beginning to lower, curiosity flickering in their eyes. He pushed forward, encouraged by the shift in atmosphere. Look, I'm not here to preach or judge. I just want to offer you a way to channel your energy into something constructive. Frank said, his heart pounding with hope. If you're interested, I'd like to invite you to the diner tomorrow. You can meet some of my friends from the Steel Angels. You'll see that life can be different. After a moment of hesitation, the dark-haired boy nodded slowly. Fine, we'll come. But if it's lame, don't expect us to stick around. Frank chuckled, relief flooding through him. That's a fair deal. Just give it a shot. You might surprise yourselves. As he walked away from the park, Frank felt a lightness in his step. He had taken the first step toward creating a bridge between two worlds. With Bear and the Steel Angels by his side, he was determined to help these young men discover the potential that lay within them. The next day, as the sun set low in the sky, Frank arrived at the diner early to prepare for the meeting. The familiar sounds of clinking dishes and laughter filled the air, creating an inviting atmosphere. Bear was already there, chatting with a few of the other bikers. Think they'll show? Bear asked, looking over at Frank, who was fidgeting with the stack of pamphlets. I hope so, Frank replied, feeling the nerves resurface. I just want to help them. As the minutes ticked by, Frank kept glancing at the door. He was starting to doubt whether the young men would show up. Maybe they'd decided against it, Maybe he had overstepped. Just as that thought crept in, the door swung open, and the group of young men entered. Their presence was tentative, but they looked around with curiosity, and Frank felt a spark of hope reignite. "Hey, over here," he called, waving them over to a large booth in the corner. As they settled in, the tension in the air began to dissipate, replaced by the comforting hum of the diner. Frank introduced the young men to Bear and the others, and the bikers welcomed them with open arms, instantly putting them at ease. They shared stories about their own youthful misadventures, punctuated with laughter and camaraderie. "So, what's this about bikes?" one of the young men asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Bear grinned. "Let me tell you about the time I took my first ride. I was scared out of my mind." The stories flowed like the drinks being served, creating a bridge between generations. Frank watched, heart swelling with pride, as the young men began to relax, their skepticism melting away. As the evening progressed, Frank could see the shift in their demeanor. They were laughing, sharing their own stories, and slowly letting their guards down. It was clear they were beginning to understand that there was a different way to find strength and camaraderie, a way that didn't involve putting others down. As the meeting came to a close, Frank took a deep breath and spoke up. "I'm glad you all came. This is just the beginning. I want to keep this going, to help you find what you're looking for." "Yeah, we'd like that," the dark-haired boy admitted, a shy smile breaking through his earlier bravado. "It's kind of nice to hang out with you guys." Bear clapped him on the back, grinning widely. "Next week, we'll do a bike workshop. You'll learn about maintenance, riding skills, the whole deal. Trust me, it's a blast." As the young men left the diner, Frank felt a wave of accomplishment wash over him. They had opened their hearts, even just a crack, and he hoped it would lead them to a brighter future. With Bear and the Steel Angels by his side, Frank had become more than just a veteran. He had become a mentor, a guide for those searching for purpose. Over the next few weeks, the meetings continued. The young men began to arrive with regularity, their laughter filling the diner and creating a sense of family that transcended age and background. They engaged in discussions about life, dreams, and fears, sharing experiences that revealed their vulnerabilities and aspirations. Frank found himself reliving moments from his youth, recalling the warmth of brotherhood, forged in the heat of battle. The young men responded to his guidance, asking questions about his time in the war, seeking advice on how to navigate their own challenges. One evening, as they gathered at the diner, Frank noticed a change in the group. Their postures had straightened, their laughter rang with authenticity, and their conversations had shifted from bravado to substance. They were no longer just a group of young men seeking validation. They were becoming thoughtful individuals, learning to respect themselves and others. "Hey, Frank," one of the boys called. "I was thinking about volunteering at the community center. They're looking for people to help with the younger kids." Frank's heart swelled with pride. "That's an excellent idea. Giving back is one of the most rewarding experiences you can have." The group nodded, excited by the prospect of making a difference. Frank felt a profound sense of fulfillment as he watched them embrace this new path. He had planted a seed of hope in their hearts, and it was taking root. Yet, as they grew closer, Frank knew he had to address the bullying behavior they once exhibited. "I want to talk about something important," he began one evening, gathering them in the back of the diner. "I know we've all had our fun, but we can't forget about how you treated me in the park." The young men fell silent, the weight of their past actions evident on their faces. "I know you were just kids trying to impress each other," Frank continued. "But remember, respect is a two-way street. You want to be treated as men, you have to act like men. Let's not repeat the mistakes we've made. Instead, let's show others what it means to be part of a community." As Frank spoke, he could see the realization wash over them. They nodded in agreement, their expressions serious yet reflective. "Yeah, we've been jerks," the dark-haired boy admitted. "We want to change that." Frank smiled, encouraged by their willingness to grow. Change isn't easy, but it's worth it. You have the power to make a difference, not just in your lives, but in the lives of others. That evening marked a turning point in their journey together. The boys were eager to take responsibility for their past, seeking ways to make amends in their community. They decided to clean up the park where they had once mocked Frank, gathering their friends to help. As they worked together, Frank couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They were not only redeeming themselves but creating a positive ripple effect that would reach far beyond their small group. With each piece of trash picked up, they were reclaiming their dignity and rewriting their story. Weeks turned into months, and as the weather turned chilly, Frank found himself reminiscing about the summer that had transformed him and the young men he had once regarded with suspicion. They were no longer just a group of kids. They had become friends, brothers even, united in their mission to uplift one another. On the anniversary of D-Day, Frank found himself standing at the local memorial, surrounded by the young men he had mentored. The air was thick with emotion as they shared stories of valor and sacrifice, remembering the sacrifices made by those who had come before them. As Frank looked at the group, he saw not just young men, but a new generation of leaders, men who were not afraid to stand up for what was right. They had learned the values of respect, honor, and camaraderie that he had once held dear. "Thank you for believing in us, Frank," the dark-haired boy said, his voice filled with gratitude. "You've changed our lives." Frank felt a warmth swell within him. "No, you changed your own lives. I just provided a little guidance. Remember, you have the power to be the change you want to see in the world." As the sun set over Millbrook, casting a golden hue over the park, Frank knew this was just the beginning. He had embraced the mentor role not just for the young men but for himself as well. He had found a new purpose in his life, one that bridged the gap between generations, connecting him to the future. And as the steel angels rode into the sunset, Frank felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. Together, they had forged a new path, proving that no one is ever too old to make a difference or too young to learn the values that build a strong community. The legacy of change. As autumn rolled into Millbrook, the vibrant leaves painted the town in hues of orange and gold. Frank Thompson felt invigorated by the changes around him. The once somber apartment walls adorned with faded photographs now echoed with laughter and stories shared with his newfound friends. In the weeks following their commitment to change, the young men had transformed in ways that Frank had hoped for, but couldn't fully envision. Their days were filled with purpose, from organizing community cleanups to volunteering at the local food bank. Each encounter revealed new layers of their personalities, showing Frank just how deeply they craved acceptance and validation. One crisp morning, while enjoying a cup of coffee at the diner, Frank overheard Bear and a few of the bikers discussing plans for a charity ride to raise funds for local youth programs. The roar of engines and camaraderie filled the air, and an idea struck Frank like a bolt of lightning. "What if we invite the boys to ride with us?" he suggested, setting his coffee cup down with excitement. It could be a way to bond and show them what being part of a community feels like. Bear's eyes lit up with the idea. "That's brilliant. We can teach them about bike safety, and they'll get to experience the freedom of the open road." A wave of anticipation washed over Frank as he imagined the thrill the young men would feel riding alongside the Steel Angels. He could almost hear their laughter over the rumble of the engines, the wind whipping through their hair, and the sense of belonging blossoming in their hearts. With the charity ride planned for the following month, Frank set out to share the news with the boys. The excitement in his voice was palpable as he gathered them at the diner. "Listen up, everyone. We have a fantastic opportunity coming up," he announced, gathering their attention. "The Steel Angels are hosting a charity ride for local youth programs, and we want you all to join us." The group looked at him, curiosity etched on their faces. "What's a charity ride?" the dark-haired boy asked, leaning forward with interest. "It's a chance to ride motorcycles, enjoy the open road, and raise money to help kids in our community," Frank explained, his enthusiasm infectious. "You'll learn about bike safety, get some hands-on experience, and meet some incredible people. The boys exchanged excited glances, and Frank could see the spark of adventure igniting in their eyes. "Count us in," one of them shouted, and the others quickly agreed. As the date of the ride approached, Frank and Bear organized practice sessions for the young men. They taught them how to maintain the bikes, emphasizing safety protocols and the responsibilities that came with riding. Frank relished every moment spent with them, watching as their skills improved and their confidence grew. They were no longer just kids from the park. They were becoming a part of something larger, a movement toward positive change. The day of the charity ride arrived, and the atmosphere was electric. Frank donned his leather jacket, feeling a rush of nostalgia mixed with excitement. The Steel Angels were already gathered at the diner, bikes gleaming under the morning sun, engines purring like contented cats. The young men arrived, dressed in borrowed leather jackets that were several sizes too big but worn with pride. Their smiles lit up the parking lot as they admired the motorcycles, awe etched on their faces. "Are you ready for the ride of your life?" Bear boomed, slapping the back of one of the boys. Frank could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins as they prepared to set off. He lined the boys up for a safety briefing, emphasizing the importance of teamwork and looking out for one another. "Remember," he said, his voice steady but warm, "this isn't just about the thrill of the ride. It's about community, responsibility, and respect. You are representing the Steel Angels today, and we want to show everyone what we stand for." As they revved the engines and set off, Frank felt an overwhelming sense of joy. The roar of the bikes echoed through the streets of Millbrook, a symphony of freedom and rebellion against the mundane. The wind whipped through his hair, the sun warmed his face, and laughter erupted behind him as the young men took in the experience. The roads unfolded before them, winding through scenic landscapes dotted with trees in vibrant autumn colors. Frank glanced back, catching sight of the dark-haired boy riding alongside Bear, his eyes wide with exhilaration. In that moment, he realized how far they had all come, their laughter resonating like music, a testament to the bonds they had forged. As they rode, Frank took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered the loneliness he had felt in his earlier years, outliving friends and comrades. But now he had become a mentor, a guide, and in doing so, he had found purpose once more. They reached their destination, a sprawling field that had been set up for the charity event. A stage was erected, and booths filled with local vendors and activities lined the area. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as families and individuals gathered to support the cause. Frank and the young men dismounted, and a sense of camaraderie enveloped them. The boys were animated, rushing to explore the booths and engage with the community. They helped set up the event, pitching in wherever needed, a far cry from the reckless youth who had once mocked an old veteran. As the day unfolded, Frank watched with pride as they mingled with families, helping with games, serving food, and sharing their newfound knowledge of bikes with younger kids. Their transformation was nothing short of miraculous. When it came time for the charity auction, Frank found himself on stage alongside Bear, proudly addressing the crowd. "Thank you all for joining us today to support our local youth programs," he began, his voice steady. "This ride isn't just about the bikes. It's about building a community, mentoring our future, and showing the next generation the importance of respect and responsibility." The crowd erupted in applause, and Frank felt a swell of gratitude for the journey they had embarked on together. He could see the young men in the audience, beaming with pride as they realized their role in this moment. As the auction continued, Frank spotted the dark-haired boy enthusiastically bidding on a signed motorcycle helmet. He could hardly contain his excitement, and when he won, he held it high, cheering with his friends. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the field, Frank gathered the young men together. "I'm proud of each of you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Today wasn't just a ride. It was a demonstration of how far you've come and the impact you can have in your community." The dark-haired boy stepped forward, clutching the helmet. "Thanks for believing in us, Frank. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you." Frank felt a warmth spread through his chest as he realized the legacy he was building. This wasn't just about teaching them to ride. It was about empowering them to make a difference and become leaders in their own right. As the stars began to twinkle above, the group sat together, sharing stories and laughter. They had become a family, each member contributing to the narrative of hope and redemption. Frank knew that he had not only changed their lives, but had also found a renewed sense of purpose in his own. In the weeks that followed, the young men continued to grow, seeking out new opportunities for community service and involvement. They started their own initiative to mentor younger kids in the area, demonstrating the importance of respect, responsibility, and the spirit of camaraderie. Frank watched with pride as they flourished, their hearts and minds filled with ambition and determination. They were no longer the boys who had once mocked him in the park. They were becoming young men dedicated to making a positive impact. One evening, as they sat around a campfire, Frank shared stories from his time in the war. The crackle of the fire illuminated their faces, and they listened intently, hanging onto every word. "Courage isn't just about facing a battlefield," Frank explained, his voice steady. "It's also about standing up for what's right in your everyday life. It's about having the strength to confront your own mistakes and strive to be better." The dark-haired boy looked deep in thought, his expression serious. "I never really thought about it that way. I used to think courage was just about being tough, but now I see it's about kindness and respect too." As the night wore on, Frank realized that he had not just imparted wisdom, but had also learned from them. Their resilience and eagerness to change inspired him. In their journey toward redemption, they were teaching him that life was a continuous cycle of growth and learning, no matter one's age. Months passed, and winter began to blanket Millbrook in white. The park that had once been a site of torment for Frank was now a place of gathering and celebration for the young men. They organized winter activities, bringing joy to the community and rekindling a sense of belonging in others who felt lost. One afternoon, as Frank strolled through the park, he spotted the boys setting up a holiday festival. Their laughter echoed through the air as they decorated trees and arranged activities for the neighborhood children. He couldn't help but smile at the sight. "Hey, Frank," the dark-haired boy called, waving him over. "Come help us out." Frank approached, feeling a sense of belonging wash over him. "What do you need?" "We're making hot chocolate for the kids, but we could use an extra hand," the boy replied, grinning widely. Frank jumped in, feeling alive in a way he hadn't in years. As they poured cups of hot chocolate and shared stories with the kids, he felt the warmth of community enveloping him. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and purple, Frank stood back and observed. He saw not just a group of young men who had once bullied him. He saw a collective force for good, a testament to the power of transformation. And as he watched the joy on the children's faces, he understood that this legacy was far beyond his own. It was a ripple effect, spreading kindness and positivity, fostering a community that would continue to uplift one another. Frank Thompson had not just survived the trials of life. He had thrived, becoming a beacon of hope and a mentor to those who needed guidance. And in doing so, he had created a family, a bond that transcended generations, proving that anyone, regardless of age, can make a profound difference in the world. The circle of change. As winter settled deeper into Millbrook, the community center buzzed with the excitement of the holiday season. Frank Thompson found himself at the heart of it all, surrounded by the young men he had once considered just a group of neighborhood troublemakers. They had transformed into passionate advocates for their community, and he couldn't have been prouder. With the success of their winter festival behind them, the boys began brainstorming new projects to engage with the community. One evening, as they gathered at the diner to share ideas over hot coffee and fries, the atmosphere was alive with energy. "What if we organize a community cleanup after the holidays?" the dark-haired boy suggested, leaning forward with enthusiasm. "We can get everyone involved. Families, kids, everyone." Frank nodded in agreement, his heart swelling with pride at their commitment to change. That's a fantastic idea. Not only will it beautify our park, but it will also foster a sense of responsibility and ownership within the community. The boys quickly rallied around the idea, discussing strategies to spread the word. They divided tasks, each taking on a role. Some would design posters, others would approach local businesses for sponsorships, and a few would use social media to engage the community. Over the following weeks, their excitement and dedication became contagious. As they crafted posters and planned logistics, Frank watched as they embraced the project with the same passion they had displayed during the charity ride. They were not just organizing a cleanup. They were creating a movement. On the day of the cleanup, the sun peeked through a blanket of gray clouds, casting a soft light over the park. Frank arrived early, setting up tables with refreshments and supplies. He was joined by the Steel Angels, who brought their bikes as a symbol of support. As families began to arrive, Frank felt a surge of joy. The park, once a place where he had faced ridicule and disrespect, was now filled with laughter and a spirit of camaraderie. The young men greeted each participant with enthusiasm, handing out trash bags and gloves while sharing stories of their recent accomplishments. "Hey, Frank," the dark-haired boy called out as he handed out supplies. "Check this out." He gestured toward a group of younger kids who were excitedly tying colorful ribbons to the trees, decorating them for the winter season. The sight warmed Frank's heart. These boys were not just leading their peers, but were also inspiring the next generation. As the cleanup began, laughter and chatter filled the air. Frank worked alongside the young men, picking up litter and chatting with families who had come to help. It was a beautiful day, and the camaraderie reminded him of his days in the service, where teamwork was paramount. Midway through the cleanup, Frank paused to take in the scene. He watched as the boys motivated others, their energy infectious. They were no longer the reckless youths he had first encountered. They were leaders, guiding the community toward a shared goal. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through his reverie. "Hey, old-timer." It was one of the young men who had initially bullied him. He was now covered in dirt and holding a trash bag filled to the brim. "You better keep up, or we might just outshine you." Frank chuckled, shaking his head. "I'll show you who's keeping up." With newfound energy, he raced after the group, proving that age was just a number. As the day progressed, they filled several large trash bags, clearing the park of debris. Families came together, sharing stories and laughter, united by a common purpose. Frank felt a sense of belonging wash over him, a feeling he had long yearned for. Once the cleanup concluded, they gathered in a circle to celebrate their success. Frank stood at the center, surrounded by smiling faces, some still dusty and tired from their efforts. "I want to thank each and every one of you," he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "What we accomplished today goes far beyond picking up trash. We've shown that together, we can create a positive change in our community. You've all become leaders in your own right." The young men beamed with pride, exchanging glances as Frank continued. "Remember that this is just the beginning. You have the power to inspire others and lead by example. Continue to uplift one another and those around you." After Frank spoke, the dark-haired boy stepped forward. "We couldn't have done this without you, Frank. You believed in us when no one else did. You taught us what it means to respect ourselves and others." Frank felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. "No, my friend, you did this. You took the first step, and I merely guided you along the way." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Frank watched as families packed up their belongings, children holding onto their newly decorated ribbons, and the young men discussing their next project. He felt a sense of fulfillment in his heart, a realization that he had helped plant the seeds of change. In the weeks that followed, the cleanup sparked a series of new initiatives in the community. The young men proposed starting a youth mentorship program, pairing high school students with younger kids who needed guidance. Frank wholeheartedly supported the idea, offering his time to help organize and lead the program. Their first meeting was held at the community center, And as the boys stepped into the room, Frank noticed the nervous energy radiating from them. "Remember," he said, addressing both the mentors and mentees, "this is about connection, support, and encouragement. You are here to uplift each other." The room buzzed with conversation as the young men introduced themselves to the younger kids. Frank circulated among the groups, observing as the mentors shared stories, offered advice, and inspired the next generation. Throughout the winter months, they organized various activities, including tutoring sessions, sports events, and arts and crafts workshops. Each gathering strengthened the bonds between the mentors and their mentees, fostering a sense of community that transcended age barriers. One evening, during a particularly cold winter meeting, the dark-haired boy approached Frank with a proposal. "We've been thinking about organizing a winter carnival for the kids," he said, excitement sparkling in his eyes. "We want to create a fun event to lift their spirits and bring everyone together." Frank smiled, impressed by their initiative. "That's a wonderful idea. A carnival would be an excellent way to foster community spirit, especially during these cold months." They quickly set to work, planning games, activities, and refreshments for the event. Frank could see their passion and dedication, and he was filled with hope for the future. The day of the winter carnival arrived, and the community center was adorned with colorful decorations. Families streamed in, their faces lit with joy as they discovered the various activities available. Frank took a moment to step back and absorb the scene, feeling a sense of pride in what they had created. Throughout the day, Frank watched as the young men led games, helped with face painting, and served hot cocoa to the children. The laughter echoed throughout the center, filling the air with warmth and camaraderie. As the sun began to set, Frank gathered everyone together for a brief speech. "Thank you all for coming out today to support this carnival. What we've accomplished is remarkable. You've all shown that together we can create joy and positivity in our community, and it starts with believing in each other." The young men stood proudly beside him, nodding in agreement. They had grown into their roles as mentors, embodying the values of respect and responsibility they had learned from Frank. After the event, the boys gathered with Frank to reflect on their success. "I can't believe how many people showed up," one of them exclaimed, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Yeah, and look at all the smiles we created," another added, his voice full of pride. Frank smiled at their excitement. "You've made a significant impact today. This is what it means to be a part of a community. You've become the change you wanted to see, and it's inspiring." As they continued to discuss their next steps, Frank felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The community they had built together was thriving, and he knew that the lessons learned would extend far beyond the winter carnival. One evening, as spring began to unfurl its colors across Millbrook, Frank received a phone call from the local newspaper. They wanted to feature him and the young men in a story about community transformation. Frank was hesitant, but recognized the opportunity to highlight the positive change they had all contributed to. When the day of the interview arrived, the young men gathered with Frank at the community center, their excitement palpable. As they posed for photos and answered questions about their journey, Frank felt a sense of pride swell within him. They were no longer just a group of individuals. They were a united force for good. "Tell us about how this transformation began," the reporter prompted. Frank glanced at the young men, then back at the reporter. "It started with a simple desire to connect and uplift one another. Each of these young men faced challenges in their lives, but together, we've created a network of support that extends beyond age. They've taught me just as much as I taught them." As the article was published, it resonated throughout the community, inspiring others to engage in similar initiatives. More families reached out to Frank and the boys, eager to participate in community service projects and mentorship opportunities. The transformation in Millbrook continued to grow, with more events, activities, and programs emerging from the bonds forged between the young men and the community. Frank watched in awe as the boys he had mentored blossomed into leaders, continuing to inspire those around them. In the months that followed, Frank felt a shift within himself. He realized that he had not only become a mentor, but had also rediscovered his purpose. The loneliness that had once haunted him had been replaced by a sense of belonging and fulfillment. On a warm summer evening, Frank gathered with the young men and their mentees in the park. They had organized a community picnic, and laughter filled the air as families enjoyed good food, games, and each other's company. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Frank stood up to address the crowd. "I want to thank each of you for being here tonight. You've shown that together, we can build a community based on respect, love, and support. Remember that no matter our age, we can all learn from one another. This community is a testament to the power of change and the importance of connection." The crowd erupted into applause, and Frank's heart swelled with pride. He felt grateful for the bonds they had forged, the lessons they had learned, and the sense of family they had created. As the evening wound down, Frank took a moment to reflect. He had started as an old veteran facing harassment and ridicule, but had emerged as a symbol of resilience, transformation, and community spirit. The young men who had once bullied him had become his allies and friends, proving that with understanding, respect, and love, change was not just possible but profound. As he walked home that night, Frank couldn't help but smile, knowing that he had made a difference not just in his life, but in the lives of countless others. The legacy of friendship, respect, and community spirit would continue to flourish in Millbrook, guided by the values they had instilled in one another. And in that moment, Frank understood that true strength lay not in age or experience, but in the willingness to uplift and empower those around him.